If you've ever wished you had a podcasting pro with nearly a decade of experience whispering growth secrets into your ear, that's exactly what you'll get when you tune into Podcast Growth Tools with me, your host, Kylie Chandler. This is the ultimate show for you if you're ready to grow your podcast audience, skyrocket engagement, and turn your show into a traffic-driving, list-building powerhouse. I've been in the podcasting world since 2015, helping creators like Amy Porterfield grow their shows to over 1 million downloads a month. My superpower? Breaking down proven podcast strategies and marketing techniques into step-by-step guidance you can actually implement without fluff, overwhelm, or guesswork. On this show, we're getting real about what actually moves the needle when it comes to growing your podcast audience and using it to boost your email list growth. From actionable insights and expert interviews to behind-the-scenes secrets, I'll help you turn your podcast into a traffic-driving, list-growing machine. Grab your earbuds, hit subscribe, and let's take your podcast to the next level. Hey, and welcome back to Podcast Growth Tools. I'm so excited to bring you today's episode. I invited somebody very special on, and I actually did and coached them through a podcast audit for her podcast. So this was such a fun episode because I invited Jen Heller on, and she is the host of Homes That Heal podcast. And it was so fun because I did a live audit slash coaching call with her, and we really dove into the issues that she's facing, what she's been trying in terms of marketing, and just how to improve her systems. And I walked her through what I would do if I was in charge of her podcast and gave her real tangible marketing strategies. So it's going to be really fun for you to hear this interview. She's amazing. She has such a great business and a great brand and a great podcast. And there's so much reach that she can still do with it. So I hope you enjoy this and kind of put yourself in her seat and see how it kind of pertains or how it resonates with you and your needs right now. And hey, if you are like, I want to do a discovery call and audit, I actually have some availability right now. So I would love to invite you to jump on a free call with me. We can talk through what you're doing currently, the struggles and the pain points that you're experiencing. And then I would be happy to just share a roadmap of what I would do if I was working with you. And so if you want to do that, feel free to book a call at podcastmarketinghub.com/call. And we can just chat. We can take a look at your podcast. We can see what you're struggling with and how to improve it so that you can grow your audience, grow your email list, and all the good things. So enjoy this episode. I hope that you find so much value in it. And again, if you do want to book a one-on-one discovery call with me, they're totally free. You can head to podcastmarketinghub.com/call and we can chat. All right, enjoy. All right, welcome to the podcast, Jen Heller. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited for this podcast interview because what we're doing is we are going to do kind of like a live coaching call, and we're just going to have fun and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. So let's kick it off by I want to hear from you. What is your podcast? What's your business? Like, what's it all about? What are
Mm,
you
mm,
selling? Who's your ideal customer? All that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So the podcast is called Homes That Heal. So it's all about helping people create a harmonious space for healing, but just also bringing wellness into their home. My company, Jen Heller Lifestyle, I would say the mission and the premise behind it is really years ago, about 15 years ago, I discovered I was really heavy metal toxic with mercury and lead. Fast forward a bit, I actually had a stroke and was paralyzed for a few years on the left side. So I was in a pretty bad way. And it forced me to take a big look at my life, like not from a wellness and healing perspective, but A, what could have caused this? B, what could I do to fix it? So I went down this path of this self discovery and this journey. Along the way, I discovered some factors in my life needed to change, some environmental issues as well as some relationship issues and just overall toxicity. But really what I wanted to find was the root cause of how this happened and then how could I fix it? And so, like I said, fast forward a few years, I found infrared saunas, which is probably like my main wheelhouse and one of my biggest passions. And I bought a sauna for my home and started the detox process to remove the metals. But really, what was also happening and transforming was the inner work that I was doing on myself during that process. It wasn't just like the purging of the metals, if you will, it was purging of all of the things in my life that potentially created this inflammatory storm, so to speak. So, a few years later, of course, I removed all the metals. A few years later, I opened up a wellness center, a physical brick and mortar wellness center in southern Wisconsin. Owned and operated that for about 7 years. And then when COVID came along, we closed, and I decided to let the business go entirely because I really wanted to shift gears. Podcasting was like, you know, I wouldn't say it was becoming a thing, but it was really piquing my interest, and it worked out. I always say it kind of was like the silver lining or the bittersweetness that came from that tumultuous time was that it allowed me to reassess, take a step back, and figure out how could I be a more impactful voice in an arena after about 10, I was in the space about 10 years. I really felt this pull to share on a bigger scale and share on a bigger platform. And so podcasting was, I love to talk. I love people. So I thought, why not hit record and see what happens? And so the Homes That Heal brand, like I said, just inspired me. I tried to figure out, like, okay, what am I trying to do? What's my overarching message? And it's to help people bring wellness into their home, whatever that looks like for them, but just create the space and create the environment for a real peaceful life. So that's it.
I love that story, and it makes sense. We were connected through Kathy Heller, of course, and that just makes sense that you're in her world, and I
Mhm.
love working with people who are thinking about energy and healing and all that, so this is so wonderful, and sometimes it's amazing how such a beautiful journey can evolve from something that was so challenging, from a couple of points, even like your how your podcast came to be, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think like I said, the silver linings that came from the challenges, I always say, our greatest lessons come from our greatest challenges. And so obviously you have to kind of sit with that. But yeah, that's really how the podcast evolved
Wonderful. Okay, so what year did you start your podcast?
last year. Actually coming up on a 1 year anniversary here in just a few weeks.
Yay.
I
Oh
know.
my gosh, that's so exciting, Jen. Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
talk to me about your goals. Let's start there. Like if you okay, so you're 1 year in, what would year 2 look like? What would your ideal podcast everything look like in a year?
Well, we're actually in the space right now. I actually took a bit of a hiatus at this moment from guest shows and just doing like what I call like mini solo episodes to really reassess what worked well for us in year one, what didn't work well, and like where do we want to go. And so because I'm not an expert in podcasting, all I know is like the some downloads, equals people. So the biggest goal I have is just to share. Like probably one of the questions I had for you, and we can get to this later too, is like um how do you grow? How like what are the channels on how you can get others or ask others to share, rate, and review? Like how do you show up? So if I had to say what my goal is, like my passion and my goal is to help as many people as possible bring wellness into their life. So from a platform standpoint, it's like how do you get that out there further? How do you grow and expand the reach? I think probably one of the biggest things I learned is like getting on other podcasts is really easy and a great way to share your message out with others. So that's a goal that I have this year is to we focused a lot on thoughtful episodes, thoughtful content, scheduling guests on my show, but this year I want to focus on getting on other shows and sharing on other platforms.
Well, I love your timing. You probably didn't intend to do this, but
No.
the timing of this is so great because the thing about being so early on in podcasting and then trying to get on all these shows is you don't have shows for people to binge. But the fact that you're a year in, if somebody finds you from another podcast and they go check you out, they have a bunch of episodes that they can work through versus if you have 10 episodes or something. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of why I waited because Kathy and I talked about this last year on her one of her programs was that you want to give people something to look at. So waiting, so year 1 was about me focusing, I guess, really creating the foundation, kind of honing in on I won't say metrics, but like looking at the metrics of what are people listening to? Do they like 10, 15-minute shows? Do they like 40-minute shows? Do they listen past an hour? So we now have that information and that data. So to fine tune our shows, as well as to your point, now I have something for people to listen to.
I love that. Okay, well, I'm so excited that you're asking all about growth. Obviously, that's what I focus on. And after looking at all your stuff, we're going to get into it. But before we do, what are your biggest pain points right now with the podcast?
Yeah, I would say I was chatting with my team yesterday a little bit too, just to get their insight because I do have a team, some people that help me with the show. I think the biggest pain point for me, even looking back on the last year, was streamlining, in particular to guest shows. Like I love, it's not just my message, but I want to elevate other people's stories and use my platform, my community as a platform for others. But having guests on, there's a lot of time that goes into doing that thoughtfully. So I think probably one of my biggest pain points is how to streamline the guest show process. Me everything from like the invitation, getting them on my calendar, sending them the follow-up reminders, sending them the thank you, like making sure there's a system and what does that look like? So that's one of my pain points right now is creating that strategy and or like really honing in on that system.
Okay, so well, let's dive in there and then we can talk a little bit about the growth stuff. So, when you do you have an SOP for your process for bringing a guest on yet?
Yes.
You do. Okay. And so if you have an SOP, is it not working?
Well, that's like, I mean, it is and it isn't. And that's kind of what I was trying to focus in on is like, what do you think, or like, what, I don't want to say what's etiquette, but what is too, like, what's enough or what, like, what should a person be doing? Like, am I not doing, I don't want to say, am I over analyzing it? Am I overthinking it? Or what's a good system so that we can fine tune that SOP and just kind of like set it? I don't want to say set it and forget it, but just like be really solid with it.
Okay, so I love this because what we're going to talk about is co-marketing and we're going to dive into that strategy in a little bit, but
Okay.
the experience for your guest needs to be amazing from the very first time you reach out. So what I like to do, I'll share what I do and then hopefully it supports you in what you need to tweak and fine tune. So when I reach out to a guest, I obviously there's the scheduling piece. So I have a canned reach outreach email. I also find that have just a lot of people that I know coming on, so it's a little bit more casual, but let's say that it's somebody who you are kind of cold outreaching to. So I have a canned email that I send out right away. From there, once there's a yes, I actually have another so I have all my emails saved as canned emails for this process. And then I also only record on Tuesdays. So when I have somebody who says, "Yep, I can come on your show," great. I have Tuesdays open. I send them my Calendly link with only Tuesdays open, and they can pick out what day. Now, I usually will say, "Can you pick out from between this day and this day?" Because that allows me to know when their episode will go live versus them booking in July when I wanted their episode to go in July. So, I book really far ahead. So I might say if somebody's episode is going live in let's say May or July, then I'll probably try and book it in March or April just to
Okay.
give me a little bit of time. So I'll say grab a Tuesday, grab a time in that. So that kind of allows that system and that piece to be very systematized. In
Okay.
that canned email that I send once we have things scheduled, I also have a co-marketing Google form. And basically, we'll get into this now. I wasn't planning on this
Sorry.
yet, but I know you have. No, it's perfect. Let's roll with it. This is casual. So basically, I have this co-marketing form that says like this content is going to be so good. I want us both to share it as much as we can to get this content out there.
Uh-huh.
Please check the boxes below that would support you best in helping to share this content. And then and I want you to personalize it to your specific audience and what platforms you use. But
Mhm.
I have things like let's do a newsletter swap. Do you
Mm.
want or like Instagram reels? Do you want to do an Instagram live? Do you want a post for LinkedIn? Do you want images for Pinterest? Do you want to do a podcast swap? So that means you go on their show. So and there's a few more, but I like lay them out in front of them. And then also I kind of have a little bit of an opt out box where it's like none of this at this time, which is
Okay.
fine. I always just want to put it in there so they don't feel like they have to. But generally, I haven't had anyone check that box yet.
Oh.
So yeah, so they usually will just check a couple, and then you
Mhm.
can also so from there, basically, you have them fill that out, and now they are already thinking, okay, I'm going to share this. Like I've agreed to share it in these ways, and what I like to do is actually create the content as much or the assets as much as possible for them. Meaning, if they asked for copy for LinkedIn, I'll give them copy for LinkedIn. I'll give them a post. I link them up to the reels I create so that they can use them if they want. And then,
Mhm.
of course, on social platforms, I tag them. But that goes beyond just sending out an email and saying, "Hey, your episode goes live next week. Here's the details. I'd love for you to share it." It supports them further, and it also, again, gets them to start thinking like, "Oh, okay, this needs to go in my social plan. Oh, she wants to do an email swap. Well, that could be cool." Or sometimes I'll just include like an email blurb that's literally a couple sentences like, "Hey, throw this in your weekly email." That has seemed to work really well. I did speak with somebody. I have not tried this, but I did speak with somebody who said, I have them sign something that says that they commit to sharing it. And if they do not sign it, I do not do the interview. And I was like, wow, how does that work for you? And she's like, pretty good. Everybody's pretty good about it. One guy like didn't want to, and eventually I got him to. So you
Yeah.
could try that. I don't do that though. Okay, so that's kind of like that upfront system that you're giving them to, again, from the beginning, it's like, oh, I'm having a great experience. Oh, they're so
Mm.
organized. Ooh, she wants me to share this content and she's willing to create assets for me. Awesome. That's easy.
Perfect. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, people are always looking for content to share. So make it easy for them. So
Okay.
that's kind of that system. Day of interview, obviously, you go live, do the interview, and then I have one post follow up that I like to do. And it's really just 1 week before. Again, it's a canned email where I just update all of the links that I need. But I actually, in that email, create just a Google Doc that includes anything they asked for. So if they asked for newsletter copy, you can find it there. I link up to all the reels. I make sure that they're shared with them and their team. I include go live dates. I include quick links to Spotify, Apple, YouTube. So it's all right there for them in one spot. And again, it's just a canned email that says your episode's going live on this date at this time. You can find it on these platforms. Here's a link to any assets or content that you need to help share. And then let me know if you have any questions. And so it's really that simple as far as, I mean, from top to bottom, I think I have 3 canned emails that I just change up for that person. I use the same links for recording. And then, yeah, that's really it. So I don't know if you do feel like you're overthinking or not, but
No, it
it's really
sounds
that simple.
yeah, I was going to say it sounds like the amount of emails and like the thought behind it, but I'm missing a ton of opportunity from a growth standpoint in those in that asset piece of it, like providing and asking. Like so I guess that's kind of what I was trying to describe before is that I'm missing opportunity to partner and have it mutually beneficial and us be on each other, like really create that partnership. And so, yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you. So I hadn't even thought about like the email swaps and attaching the reels. Like right now, I attach like the episode art, the thumbnail, obviously a link to the show, ask them from a rate and review. And a lot of people are super gracious. Of course, we do that, especially if we're on each other's shows. But including like the reels or some of the actual social stuff, hadn't thought of that. So that's gonna expand the reach right there. So thank you.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I love that for sure. And you actually said one that I forgot to mention, which is so good, is whenever you have somebody on your show or you go on a show, let's jump in, let's rate, review their show, all that good stuff. Just it's a quick and easy thing that anyone can do. So you mentioned that, and that is something that I include on there as well.
Right. And that's actually one of my questions I wanted to ask you because it's so I don't say it's difficult, but it's kind of like I catch myself sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go back and rate and review the show. Like it takes 5 minutes to do it. But I was curious that they're like, I've seen people have some really interesting, crafty ways and different like giveaways and different spontaneous things that you can do on your platforms to encourage people to rate and review the show. Have you found those to be helpful or beneficial?
So I want to go back to something you said earlier, and you said downloads equal people, and that's not necessarily the truth. So there's so many other metrics, and the way we need to be thinking about it is we need to keep our existing listeners happy. We need to keep them coming back. And then of course we need to get new people. But the old mindset is, oh, look at all these downloads I have. This equals people that could potentially, be in my business. But that's not entirely the whole picture. For me and my clients, I have a whole metric tracking system that we look at that helps us to better understand who the real listeners are, the unique listeners. And so we're not getting to get into that today. I do
Mhm.
think I need to do an episode all about the metrics that I like to track because I've had a lot of people ask. But I do want to get that thought out of your mind or start to work that out of your mind because we do get so caught up on downloads and it's not giving us the full picture. We also want to be focusing on getting those people from your podcast over onto your email list. Because I know you have a pretty decent sized email list. You have like 7,000 people on your email list.
I do, yeah. That's been an asset that I've really, or a channel that I've really nurtured. And actually, years ago when I started the wellness center, that was something which has kind of come full circle. Like I got into the business years ago when you could get Facebook ads for like $5. Like you could be seen everywhere. It was glorious. Like it was a beautiful time to be building a business back, 10, 15 years ago because you could really be seen. You could get on these platforms. And then funnels came hard and heavy. People got into all these things. Algorithms all came, Instagram, everything changed. And so I took a step back because I really struggled with that as a small business owner. I didn't have the marketing budget to support thousands of dollars and not understanding an actual ROI or understanding what it was going to do for me. So I pulled back from that and really leaned into organic reach and leveraging. At the time, I was a brick and mortar. So I leveraged at other businesses and created like good old fashioned partnerships, if you will, right? Like just building relationships. And then I started emailing all of the community once a week. I got really consistent. Tuesday mornings, I'd send out an email. It was basically just like an update and a recap of what was going on at the wellness center. And I was getting like 60, 70, 80%
Mm.
open rate. And so I thought, this is where it's at. This is a direct conversation with my people. I can communicate with them. And I just leaned into that. So that's also why I like the podcast because it feels like the same thing. It's a direct line. It's my voice, it's me in their ear. I can speak directly to them. There's no algorithm. So, and I also want to say thank you for showing me that downloads don't equal people because you're totally right. And that's game changing for me mindset wise to think like I need to support my super fans. I need to support my loyal base, not only and create content that they love, but then they're willing to share out because that's really where it's at. So thank you for that.
Yes. And so I want to get into some growth strategies, but then I want to come back to how you can identify the revenue that you're making from your podcast because I know you have a membership. So we can be using that. And I want to hear more about your membership. But first, okay, so let's talk about growth for a little bit. So when I went and checked things out, here's the way that I would go about it is I would start by creating a podcast centric quiz. Because when somebody does find you, how many episodes are you at right now? Are you at like seven? What?
No, I think we're 40, 42. 39 have
Okay,
aired, but we've recorded about 42. So we're about 3 weeks, 3, 4 weeks usually in advance. But
amazing. Okay, so when somebody new does find you, figuring out where to start within those 42 episodes, like the best of the best, is difficult, right? And you can
yeah.
imagine the longer you go, the harder it's going to be to really understand, okay, what would serve me best on my journey? How can Jen support me with her podcast? So creating a quiz basically that is focused on your ideal customer. So if you have like two or three buckets of who your ideal customers are, and they fall into those buckets, you'll curate this quiz that sends them a podcast centric or a podcast playlist based on what would serve them best. So they can start with these 10 podcast episodes. On top of that, I know you have a lot of affiliate links and things like that. So you can then move them into a nurture sequence that starts to support them with more content, support them with, hey, have you tried this XYZ product? That's very specific to what they need.
Mm,
So it's the quiz. They're getting the playlist, which means they're going to go download those episodes. Now they're going to become a loyal super fan because you've been in their pocket. You've given them all this free value.
mhm,
Plus, you're nurturing them with this email sequence that is actually eventually going to drive them into an offer. I generally say a somewhat low ticket offer. That's where I know you have the membership.
mhm.
So, how much is your membership?
97 a month.
97 per month. So you could
Mhm,
potentially drive it into that with some sort of like do like a fast action discount or something like that for these
yeah.
people in that sequence. And so that is something that I would do. The reason that your business is so great for this is One, this is going to attract new people to the podcast. It's going to attract new people to your email list. It's also going to show them the offer. So it's going to generate revenue for you. It's also going to ignite people who may have listened to your podcast, but maybe fell off, and bring them back into your world. It's a great way to reactivate maybe a cold segment of your email list. And then even for your super fans, it goes above and beyond to serve them. And they're probably going to turn around and share it because they're so excited about, oh my gosh, she has a quiz. What lastly, we talked about ads a little bit, but the CPC for quizzes is generally much lower when you are running ads to quizzes because people love to take them. So it
Oh,
rewards you for that.
oh, I
So
did
this
not
is
know.
great for growing your email list, driving downloads, creating new listeners, engaging old listeners, all
Mhm.
of the things. So it's kind of a big thing to do, but I highly recommend doing it because once you have that, that becomes an evergreen asset that you can use over and over
Mhm.
again. And as you have more episodes, you go in and you just tweak the episodes. Oh, I have 30 more episodes. I'm going to go and put some of my newer ones in there. So that's a beautiful thing. Or if your ideal customer changes at all, you can tweak those buckets a little bit. If your offer changes, you can tweak that a little bit. So it's this really strong marketing strategy that I highly recommend you consider putting into place.
Yeah.
Beyond that,
Okay.
yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say my head is spinning right now because this is exactly what I've been looking for is ways to kind of drive and channel. So as I mentioned, infrared saunas is kind of my wheelhouse. That's what I sell. That's a tangible product I sell. On the website, I have these pages called Gen Recommends, which are different supplements, products, yoga mats, cold plunge, red light, like all these different modalities and these things that you can do, as well as like home products. So it'll allow me to nurture people who are just maybe stepping into it. Maybe they're shopping saunas and they're not quite ready. But then I have a ton of people who've already bought their sauna or they've already bought their red light tower. And now they're looking for other ways like the towels or the cleaners or different things. So I can kind of curate what you're saying is I can kind of curate that quiz to be really tailored to what that person is looking for and the experience they're on. And then if they just want to be in my membership, which is kind of just proximity to me. We do teaching and learning. That's for everybody, but that's not everybody's interest. So I can basically ask if they're interested in that membership or that experience. They can kind of go to that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Essentially, how I see it is you get them to take the quiz, you bring them through the nurture sequence, and you offer something bigger on the end of that
Perfect.
nurture sequence.
Got it.
And so it depends. It depends what each bucket, like what the end point is. If you have a big digital course or if you have something like that, or yeah, these depending on these buckets, then you can offer them something big at the end. But that is kind of the trail of it. And once you create that, I highly recommend that you treat it just like if you were to launch your okay, so I saw that your membership has a wait list. So do you just open it periodically?
Yeah, so the Homes That Heal, I'm actually in the process of basically teaching like a 6 course, like a deep dive into like really basically like any other course a person would sign up for. It's a weekly course. And so I haven't launched that yet. That's what the wait list is for people who've already raised their hand and said, "We're ready to go," and you're ready to go. So I'm going to teach a deeper dive into the Homes That Heal program on how you can completely harmonize. Like right now, the home wellness checklist, which is a free download on the site, that's kind of the roadmap and the base for the program. But that's essentially what I want to teach is really dig into that. So we haven't launched that yet. That's coming.
I love it. So the way that you would launch that, you're going to launch this quiz and with your promo, the same thing. You're going to build out like a promo week. You're going to
Mhm.
launch it just like you would with email marketing, social media marketing, running some ads if you have the budget for it. And then pulling in one little trick that I love to do is within those playlists, I
Mhm.
recommend having just a couple guests, like a couple of your top guests.
Yeah.
Like they knocked it out of the park because for two reasons. One, you want to make sure you're positioning yourself as the expert with these new people coming in.
Okay.
But the beautiful thing about having those guest interviews is you can then let them know, let their team know, hey, by the way, I've created this awesome quiz. You are actually part of it. You're part of the playlist. I'd love for you to help me promote this. And then you give them the assets to promote it during that promo week. So it really gives everything a bump and a boost.
Yeah.
And that's what I love doing with that.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that.
And then a couple other quick hitters that I would recommend is one, I think there could be a little bit more strategy into your show notes. like you said, organic marketing, organic discoverability, you can enhance them with SEO by just being working with ChatGPT and really make sure we have our keywords, our key phrases optimized, having some images. I know you have YouTube, so embedding your YouTube into the show notes, embedding the player, and just extending them a little bit more to make them a little bit more bloggy, which I know you have a blog as well, right?
Yeah, this is actually what's happening right now is I did bring on she's been a writer for me or a VA for me for quite some time, and she's amazing at SEO and just different writing. And so I just transitioned that over to her about 2 weeks ago. So we're definitely going to work on that, but I'm going to make a mental note. We did not talk about embedding YouTube into the show notes at all. So I will make a note. I'm going to write that down really quick and make a mental note of that as well. But yeah, sharpening up the show notes and so that they're more reachable in SEO is definitely on the list.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And for those listening, this is why we're doing this, just
Yeah.
the reason you said, and this is why it's important to invest in that. Okay, the other fun thing that I think, so we talked about guest co-marketing. The other fun thing I think you could really do with your website is optimize it. And so what that means is you want to take a look at your top performing web pages because you have a pretty built out website. You have blogs, you have a podcast page, you have the Jen recommends, all of these other things, you might find that you have some interesting pages that are actually pretty well visited. And so, what you want to do is basically create a freebie that drives people to your podcast. I mean, it can literally just be like a bundle of my top infrared sauna tips, and then it's like 3 to 5 episodes that's all about this, or my morning routine recommendations, and then you put like
Okay.
3 to 5 episodes that are like binge these episodes to really understand the benefits of XYZ in your morning routine. And then you start to optimize your website with banners, pop-ups, things like that. And so again, not only are we capturing people that are interested on being in your email list, we're also driving people to the podcast. So again, it has kind of this double component to it. I'm always about combining those two. If we're going to get people to the podcast, let's get them to the email list and vice versa. So that's one thing I think you should definitely do. And then talk to me a little bit about your newsletter. So are you still emailing people every week? And what is in that email?
Yes, we've switched to Friday mornings. That Friday morning that a newsletter goes out, and it's really just it's highlighting the podcast. The podcast drop at 6 a.m. on Tuesday mornings. So the Friday morning newsletter always highlights a little bit about the show that aired on Tuesday, or sometimes I think we go back. Actually, I think it's back 2 shows. So there's kind of like a 3-week campaign, if you will, on each show. And so the newsletter highlights the show. It highlights just any updates that I have or anything that I've got going on. If I was at like a cool, like I travel, if I was at a cool, place, or, just usually some sort of like, I call it Genify, like some sort of Genified update so that people feel connected. Usually at the end or somewhere in there, we also ask a question for people to respond back for some sort of engagement, like tell me about XYZ. If you recently bought a sauna, I'd love to hear your experience. If you've ever been to, you know, a Kathy Heller event or whatever, if you've been to a retreat lately or whatever, like I'd love to hear your experience. So oftentimes we do ask for engagement and for people to respond back, and we get a ton of emails, which is fun. But that's pretty much it. We kind of keep it short and sweet, I will say. So I'd love your thoughts on that, but we kind of keep it kind of punchy and sweet so that people can read it quickly. It links to a few things, they can respond, and they've got proximity to me, and that's about it.
What's your average open rate?
Um, gosh, we usually like it. I would say average, we're in 60%, 65%.
Amazing. So the best thing I can tell you is to test it. Do a couple long ones. Do a couple story format kind of that obviously still very much ties into the podcast and drives people to the podcast. And make sure you're having like quick links to Spotify, Apple, YouTube in there. Like I actually put buttons. I don't know if you're on my in my email list, but I put buttons in there that says tune in here. So make sure you're doing that. But I would play around and see what happens. See what people are responding to. Since you have such a big audience, you could even A B test and do half of a short email to one segment and then half of a long email to a longer segment and just get
Mhm.
feedback on it from your audience. Because they might really like those story ones. And that gives you more opportunity to plug the podcast as well.
Okay. So if I were to write a blog, like a story that would live on the site as a blog, would I kind of do a bit of the story, kind of tease it out and then say to read the full story, hop over here? Is that a good idea, do you think? Or would you put the whole story in the email?
So, this is a great question because I would actually rather have people go to your podcast from the email versus your blog and then from the blog to the podcast because we're going to lose a chunk of them along the way. So what you could do is since the blog is about the podcast, use a segment of it to tease
Okay.
it in the email and then drive people to directly to the podcast platforms.
Okay.
That way we're getting because people are already on your email list here. So we don't need to get these people on your email list,
Right.
but we do want to make sure that they're getting over to the podcast because that's another piece is a lot of people forget about their existing audience when a chunk of them might not be really aware that, oh yeah, she is dropping a new episode every single week, but they're not subscribed, they're not following, and they're not getting automatic downloads. So giving them the tools they need to do those
Hmm.
is really important. And going back to the nurture sequence for the quiz, that's actually one email that I recommend is all about how you get these people to follow and subscribe and you show them the steps. Hey, by the way, make sure you're following so you never miss an episode. This is how you do it on Spotify. This is how you do it on Apple. So
Okay.
that's something to be doing as well.
Okay. Awesome. That's gold. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, one more question about the newsletter. So I know you're kind of on LinkedIn or you were?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I do not post. I was actually just talking to my one of my team members about that the other day. I was like, I've been on LinkedIn forever just to have a presence, and I get messages from people and do connections, but it's probably been 6 years since I've actually posted, maybe even longer, like an actual post. But we're gonna re-engage. We're gonna re-engage. But I'd love your thoughts on it.
No, I love that. I do love LinkedIn for I think for promoting the podcast, it's a really strong place. On top of that, I would just take your newsletters that you're doing every single Friday and put them as a newsletter on LinkedIn because they have newsletters and there's no barrier of entrance. Like people can just easily subscribe on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So the key for you is to make sure you get them on your email list. So basically you can use the same content that you're creating for your newsletter, but
Hmm.
just make sure you're doing CTAs within that LinkedIn newsletter that get them on your email list. So whether it's a free resource or anything like that, make sure that you're embedding those every single time you release one. So
Okay.
that's what I would recommend doing if you're going to be engaging on LinkedIn again.
Hmm.
Okay, I've given you a lot to work with and a lot to think about. So why don't we stop there and answer any questions that you have at this point?
Okay, so these are so we already talked about the streamline sequence for guest shows. That was kind of a hot button for me. We talked about the rates and how to rate and review and share on the show. Oh,
Oh, I'll give you a little note on that. One thing
okay,
that you could potentially do is you can automate like type forms or something like that. And so if you want this is actually a great way to get people on your email list. If they submit an image of the review and to the type form, you can automate it to send them a free resource. And now they're on your email list and you gave them something free.
got it.
So that's a
Okay.
good incentive.
Okay. I heard, so this is a question slash verification, if you will. I heard a while back that if you like, how do you get more seen on, say, like Apple or Spotify or some of these platforms? And I heard at some point, I think it was sometime last year, that if you create themed shows or specific shows in and around, say, what's going like the holidays or like certain like for example, it's spring. So would I be doing shows on spring detox or like things that would highlight or that are relevant for the time? Do you have any experience with that or do you have any insight on if that I don't say if that actually works, but is that a good strategy for growth or like how do you get seen? How do you get Apple to be like, check out this show? Or you know what I mean? Like from a growth standpoint. Any tricks of the trade there?
Let's talk about the spring thing. So the reason that that would work well is because people are going to be searching for spring cleaning, like how to detox your house. They're going to be looking for those things, obviously, in spring cleaning versus like
Mhm.
at Christmas time, probably. So
Right.
that is great for optimizing like search. So SEO. So I always like to think of Apple, Spotify as their own little search hubs. And
Okay.
so anytime that you are naming an episode, make sure that it has those really strong keywords in it, just like you would for a blog. Same with the description. Don't just throw together a quick description. Actually be thinking what keywords and key phrases need to be in here. What would my person be searching when they are looking for this episode? And then make sure that they're in both of those things. So in terms of like Apple noticing you, I don't know. Like I
Well,
feel like did you see Steve Wilson? He's friends with Kathy.
yeah.
I would just was on a call with him last week, and sometimes I feel like when I'm even he's kind of like, it's just Apple's kind of doing its thing, and it's so funny because I met with other people who have worked for Apple, and they're very they hold their chest pieces. What do they say? They hold their
Pretty tight
pieces
to the
close to their
chest.
chest or something. Because I'm like, so how do you XYZ? And they'll be like, yes, yes, and then just not really answer. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it's a
I
mystery.
I feel like Kathy was probably the one that mentioned that, and Steve was probably at the event, or he was definitely at a couple of events, and I heard that, and I was like, "Is there any bones to that? Like, is there anything to that?" But to what you're describing makes perfect sense because this is actually what I was curious about: is sitting down with my team, figuring out, stretching out the year, like how the year ebbs and flows, like. Being in this business, I know what people are thinking about spring cleaning, spring detox, and then kids get out of school, what's going on in the summer. People want to be outdoors. So, like, I already know what my community and what my ideal clients are thinking at certain times of the year. And then into the fall, kids go back to school, they sink into the teens. People are like, we got to get back to basics. But I never thought about it in the sense of a title, like using keywords or like thinking as
Mhm.
Apple as almost like a search engine. Like, what would people be searching for in Apple, so to speak. So that's perfect. So that actually answers my question. So,
Oh,
but I think,
good.
yeah, so that'll be good for us kind of laying out the schedule for the year, what we're looking for. Um, this is kind of a random question. Um, and I don't know, I'm curious what you would say if you could pick. I'm going to read this how I wrote this down. What do you see as the number one mistake new podcasters make? I'm curious if I fell in the trap, so to speak, but also like, what do you see as, I don't want to say not worth your time, but if a person, I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, you want to put your time into the quiz because that's that's something I can integrate. But is there something that you would suggest not focusing on, if that makes sense?
I want to start with a mistake I see a lot of new podcasters making, and then let's talk about maybe some things that you can just like leave at this on the side right now. So the first thing is not paying enough attention to the searchability of your titles, your descriptions, even your podcast name. Like when you're naming your podcast, you probably, if you can, you want the first or the second word to be very much related to who your ideal customer is, what your company is, and what they might be searching. So like
And
for me, podcast growth tool is like people want to know how to grow their podcast, so they're going to be searching it. So that's what I like if somebody's brand new and they're starting to think about it. If you already have a title and you're like, oh shoot, I kind of want to optimize on it, you can actually just go in and change your podcast title, but keep the second part of it what it is. So I don't know, like, you could just put something right before it, and you're not changing anything else. You're not
okay.
changing your cover art, you're not changing any of your marketing stuff, you're not writing this anywhere else. It's literally just in your podcast platform. You're
Okay.
changing, like, if it's for women or, like, women and family health, homes that heal, something like that. That's not it, but, so that's something for somebody who already has title name that might be like, oh, a little cutesy or something. But yeah, so new podcasters, I would highly recommend really be thinking about the keywords and then optimize them early on. Depending on what podcast platform you're on, you can actually go back and edit your titles, you can edit your description. I know for Spotify creators, you cannot do this if you're on Spotify for creators, but I'm on Libsyn. I can do this if I needed. If you wanna test it, I would just recommend testing 1 because
Mhm.
I know for Spotify creators, it, like, bumps it up to the top, which we don't want. But that is something there. Okay, in terms of something not to do, this is a really great question. I think 1, if you're a new podcaster, don't try to be everywhere at once. Like, figure out where your people are and start there. Just, like, start there, focus on those platforms for getting it out to people.
Mhm.
yeah, just focus on a few platforms that you know your people are on, engage with them, and remember that every time you have somebody new listening you or following you or getting on your email list, if you're new, reach out to them. Like, go old school and just send them a note, thank them for following, thank them for jumping on the email list if you don't have a welcome sequence, which I'm sure you do. So there's that, and then the other thing I would do if I was new is get into a really strong system for podcast production. So actually next week I have an episode all about my podcast production and how I do it and how I batch out to like I'm batched out through August. And if you don't put that into place right away, you're going to be so exhausted you're probably going to give up on podcasting because that's what I see all the time, right? It's like so you have to really sit down and create a strong flow from ideation to pushing publish. So I'd say those are my new tips for my tips for new podcasters.
Yeah, that's definitely a pain point of mine is I got into a point where so like I sell saunas, right? So sauna season is in the winter. If you get behind like I got behind on batch recording shows and it was like I was like underwater, like just trying to stay afloat because I wanted to continue to support the show every week and like do all these things. But that's definitely a pain point I learned in year 1 is that I need to understand what my schedule and my seasons are and I need to plan around that. So that's why I'm taking this hiatus right now is to reassess what worked well, what didn't, what can we do to like get in front of some things, streamline some things. And that's I guess that's kind of why ask the question is I don't want to say it's a mistake. I think everything we've done has been a lesson of learning and whether it was a challenge or not, it's given us data and information. I'm curious, where do we focus when you find the things that are working, like focus our energy. And so like my email list, my current community, honing in on maybe a quiz or something like that and just focusing on those things, like really perfecting that before we hop into something else. So thank you. That's the clarity I'm looking
Yes.
for.
Well, and I wanted to say one more thing and then we'll wrap up. But I would also be really mindful about how you're driving people from your podcast to your email list. So how often are you giving them a CTA to get on your email list? What are you supporting them with? So every single episode you want to be inviting them to join you on your email list
Okay.
because once they're on your email list, they can turn into a paying customer.
That's something I'm not doing consistently. I wouldn't say well, because I do it once in a while. I record all my intros, like a couple minute intro and I honestly just do it based off of what I'm feeling, like what the vibe of the show is. Like it might make sense to talk more about saunas, it might make sense to talk more about the whole wellness checklist. It just kind of depends on who the guest is that day. But I don't consistently say like I always say hop over to my website or hop over to the, Jen Heller or Jen recommends pages, sign up for this if you're interested, but I don't do it for every show. So I probably could get a little better at that.
Well, and that checklist sounds like it would serve anyone for any topic. So it's like
Okay.
that can be your that can be your go-to until you have the quiz and then it becomes the quiz. And the quiz, like I said, it's evergreen. So even if it's baked into your episodes down the road,
Mhm.
you can have it live on for a really long time and continue to generate leads. And then if you ever do change it, if you ever fully update it to a quiz, you just redirect or just have that as the new quiz and then you still have it working.
I
So
was gonna say, still just a well-oiled machine. I love it.
oh, Jen, thank you so much for coming on. What are you most excited about?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm most excited about just like I said, this step back that we're doing is really fun and excited to like really look at the year as a whole on fine tuning what we can do. I'm really excited about some upcoming shows and guests that we have coming on and helping more people with their wellness. I think we're living through a really interesting time right now where people are really digging deep inward on their health and well-being and their relationships and like what's important to them. So it's me personally to be in the space for a really long time to see and feel this shift happening is really really warms my heart. So I'm just excited for the runway in front of us and to help as many people as possible with their health and well-being.
Oh, I love that. Well, and from one Midwest girl to the other, it was such an honor to have you on.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I can't wait to see what you guys do. I'll be sure to link up your show in the show notes and all those good things, and we'll share it. We'll co market it together.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kylie. It was a pleasure.